trust of our Divine Mother. Our Divine Mother says, if need be, a prayer addressed to the Divine. I belong to you and I want to know you so that all that I do is nothing but what you want me to do. Encourage only what leads quickly to the Lord and serves His divine purpose. With love and blessings, says our Divine Mother. Words of our Divine Mother from the book Question and Answers, Volume 3, topic Psychic Presence and Psychic Being, Real Origin of Race Superiority. Our Divine Mother says, with regard to the evolution upwards, it is more correct to speak of the psychic presence than the psychic being. For it is the psychic presence which little by little becomes the psychic being. In each evolving form, there is this presence, but it is not individualized. It is something which is capable of growth and follows the moment of the evolution. It is not a descent of the involution from above. It is formed progressively around the spark of the divine consciousness, which is meant to be the center of a growing being, which becomes the psychic being when it is at last individualized. It is this spark that is permanent and gathers round itself all sorts of elements for the formation of that individuality. The true psychic being is formed only when the psychic personality is fully grown, fully built up round the eternal divine spark. It attains its culmination, its total fulfillment, if and when it unites with a being or personality from above. Our Divine Mother says, below the human level, there is ordinarily hardly any individual formation. There is only this presence, more or less. But when, by the growth of the body, round the spark of divine consciousness, humanity began upon the earth, certain human organisms became in the course of this progressive growth sufficiently perfected, and by their opening and receptivity allowed a junction with certain beings descending from above. This gave rise to a kind of divine humanity, what may be called a race of the elite. If only they had remained by themselves, these people would have continued as a race unique and superhuman. Indeed, many races have made claims to be that. The Aryan, the Semitic, and the Japanese have all in turn considered themselves the chosen race. But in fact, there has been a general leveling of humanity, a lot of intermixture, for there arose the necessity of prolongation of the superior race, which drove it to intermix with the rest of humanity, the animal humanity, that is to say. Our Divine Mother says, thus its value was degraded and led to that great fall which is spoken of in the world scriptures, the coming out of paradise, the end of the golden age. Indeed, it was a loss from the point of view of consciousness, but not from that of material strength, since it was a tremendous gain to ordinary humanity. There were certainly some beings who had a very strong will not to mix, who resented losing their superiority. It is just this that is the real origin of race pride, race exclusiveness, a special caste distinction like that cherished by various people in India. But at present, it cannot be said that there is any portion of mankind which is purely animal. All the races have been touched by the descent from above, and owing to the extensive intermixture, the result of the involution was more widely spread. Of course, one cannot say that every man has got a psychic being, just as one cannot refuse to grant it to every animal. Our Divine Mother says many animals that have lived near man have some beginnings of it, while so often one comes across people who do not seem to be anything else than brutes. Here too, there has been a good deal of leveling. But on the whole, the psychic, in the true sense, starts at the human stage. That is also why any religion declares only man has a soul. In man alone, there is the possibility of the psychic being growing to its full stature, even so far as to be able in the end to join and unite with a descending being, a Godhead from above, says our Divine Mother. Next words of our Divine Mother, taken from the collective works of our Divine Mother, volume 14, topic aspects of sadhana, subtopic examiners. The Examiners, page 42. Our Divine Mother says, the integral yoga consists of an uninterrupted series of examinations that one has to undergo without any previous warning, that obliging you to be constantly on the alert and attentive. Three group of examiners set us these tests. They appear to have nothing to do with one another, and their methods are so different, sometimes even so apparently contradictory, that it seems as if they could not possibly be leading towards the same goal. Nevertheless, they complement one another, work towards the same end, and are all indispensable to the completeness of the result. Our Divine Mother says the three types of examinations are those set by the forces of nature, those set by spiritual and divine forces, and those set by hostile forces. These last are the most deceptive in their appearance, and to avoid being caught unawares and unprepared requires a state of constant watchfulness, sincerity, and humility. The most commonplace circumstances, the events of everyday life, the most apparently insignificant people and things all belong to one or other of these three kinds of examiners. In this vast and complex organization of tests, those events that are generally considered the most important in life are the easiest examinations to undergo, because they find you ready and on your guard. Our Divine Mother says it is easier to stumble over the little stones in your path because they attract no attention. Endurance and plasticity, cheerfulness and fearlessness are the qualities specially needed for the examinations of physical nature. Aspiration, trust, idealism, enthusiasm, and generous self giving for spiritual examinations. Vigilance, sincerity, and humility for the examinations from hostile forces. And our Divine Mother says, And do not imagine that there are, on the one hand, people who undergo the examinations, and on the other, people who set them. Depending on the circumstances and the moment, we are all both examiners and examinees, and it may even happen that one is at the same time both examiner and examinee. And the benefit one derives from this depends both in quality and in quantity on the intensity of one's aspiration and the awakening of one's consciousness. To conclude, a final piece of advice, says our Divine Mother: never set yourself up as an examiner. For a while, it is good to remember constantly that one may be undergoing a very important examination. It is extremely dangerous to imagine that one is responsible for setting examination for others. That is the open door to the most ridiculous and harmful kinds of vanity. It is the supreme wisdom which decides these things and not the ignorant human will. Our Divine Mother says each time you have to make progress, you have to undergo an examination. In ancient times, the disciple had to undergo several tests and severe tests to prove his ability for initiation. Here, we do not follow that method. Apparently, there is no test and no trial. But if you see the truth, you will find that here it is much more difficult. There, the disciple knew that he was undergoing a period of trial, and after he had passed through some outward tests, he was taken in. But here, you have to face life, and you're watched at every moment. It is not what you do in the solitude of the forest, but what you do in the thick of the battle of life that is important. Our Divine Mother says, are you ready to submit yourself for such tests? Are you ready to change yourself completely? You will have to throw off your ideals, values, interests, and opinions. Everything will have to be learned anew. If you're ready for all this, then take a plunge. Otherwise, do not try to step in. The whole life is a sadhana, says our Divine Mother. The whole life is a sadhana. It is a mistake to cut it into bits and say this is sadhana and that is not. Even your eating and sleeping should be a part of the sadhana. Our Divine Mother turns to someone returning to the West and says, everything can be a part of sadhana. It depends on the inner attitude. Naturally, if one lets himself be inverted by the Western atmosphere, favor to the sadhana. But even in the most materialistic milieu, if one retains one's aspiration and one's faith in the divine life, the sadhana can and should continue, says our Divine Mother.